The movie begins, and we see the hero of the story. His name was John. His house was in the middle of the jungle. John was sitting comfortably when suddenly he heard a sound. When he turned around, he was shocked because there was a group of bad people who were enemies. So, John quickly got up and ran toward his house. At the same time, John's dad, who was sleeping in the house, also heard the enemies' voices. To assess the situation, he looked outside, and he was startled because the enemies were coming toward their house. By then, John also reached home, and both father and son, without wasting any time, packed their belongings and left through the back door. They also took John's wife, who was in very bad condition due to an illness. She was severely injured, so John's dad realized that they wouldn't be able to run very far because even his daughter-in-law couldn't walk. Considering this difficulty, his dad hid John and his wife in a pit-like box, which was very dirty, but hiding was necessary. After that, his dad took a rod-like object and went out to face the attackers. Dad was alone. He confronted them and attacked 3 or 4 enemies, killing them. But how long could he fight alone? Those people were very dangerous, so in one swift attack, they brutally killed him. All of this was being watched by John and his wife, hiding in the pit. They cried in grief, helpless and unable to do anything. The enemies not only looted their home's belongings, but also took the bag that was left behind by mistake. This bag was very important to them because it contained John's wife's medicines. Without those medicines, her infection could worsen. They were already distressed, but their despair increased when they saw that the enemies didn't even spare his dad's corpse. They mounted his body like a hunted animal onto sticks and took it with them. A while later, when John returned home with his wife, he was devastated to see the condition of the house. They had ruined it entirely. When he saw his wife's wounds, his distress grew even more. Her wounds had worsened, and she developed a high fever, eventually fainting. They couldn't see a way out. Despair and death surrounded them. But in this difficult time, John gathered courage and collected wood from nearby. He first fixed the collapsing hut as his wife was inside, and it was their home. Then he left some water for his wife to drink and set out to confront the enemies to retrieve his bag. It was winter, and the enemies had taken all their warm clothes. John was wearing just a t-shirt and shorts, shivering in the cold and moving forward slowly. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything, so weakness caused him to fall. He was about to give up when he suddenly saw a small child who gave him new hope. So, he gathered strength and stood up again, following the child. When the child saw John, he got scared and started running. John also ran after the child. The child's house was nearby, and as soon as he entered, he locked the door. John used all his strength and broke the door, entering the house. Inside, he saw an elderly man, with the child lying near him out of fear. Both were shivering from the cold and were also scared of John, thinking he might harm them. But John's purpose there was only to get warm clothes. He quietly took some clothes and left. Following the enemy's trail, he reached a new place and was shocked to find only his dad's bones. The enemies had cooked and eaten his flesh. Seeing this sight, John broke down completely. After controlling his grief, he buried his dad's bones there. Now, filled with rage, John resolved to take revenge. With this determination, he moved forward again. After walking some distance, he saw a tent. Instead of entering directly, he threw a stone at the tent to check if there was any danger. When he was assured no one was there, he went inside. While searching, he found some items: a box, a matchstick, a knife, and a whistle, which he kept, thinking they might be useful later. As he continued forward, he realized he was lost. No matter how much he walked, he ended up returning to the same place 2 or 3 times. To find the way, he climbed a tall tree to spot any sign of the enemies. This idea worked because he noticed smoke rising in the distance. But while trying to focus, he slipped and fell from a great height. The sound of his fall alerted the wild dogs in the area. John started hearing their barking. To save himself, he tried to run but fell due to the injury caused by the tree fall. His leg was deeply wounded. He crawled forward slowly. Night fell, and the fear of wild dogs getting closer increased. Thinking smartly, he collected wood and lit a fire. Using one piece of wood as a torch, he faced the dogs. The dogs, scared of the fire, did not come closer and eventually ran away. This is how John barely saved his life and slept there for the night. The next morning, when he woke up, the dogs were gone. John moved forward again. This time, he saw blood in the river water. Curious to know where the blood was coming from, he went a little further and saw a woman washing a bloodied knife in the river. John acted smartly and did not approach her directly. Instead, he hid and observed her. As soon as the woman left, John followed her with a stone. This woman was one of the enemies. Following her led him to the enemy's hideout. John saw that only the woman was there. Taking advantage of the situation, he slowly entered. But then he noticed bells tied with wires on the floor. Carefully, he stepped over them and entered. There, he spotted his bag. But when he checked the bag, all the medicines were missing. Quickly, he went further inside the house and started searching for the medicines. Unaware that the woman had noticed him, she was now coming toward him. She attacked John from behind. John fought back, and they got into a scuffle. Even though John was weak due to hunger, he was stronger than the woman. He overpowered her and hit her head with a stone, killing her. After dealing with the woman, he resumed searching for the medicines in the cabinets. Suddenly, he noticed the enemies returning. He quickly cleaned up the blood and removed all evidence of the fight, so it wouldn't seem like anything had happened. Dragging the woman's body, he hid it outside behind a tree. He also hid there, keeping an eye on them. The enemies brought back the young boy he had seen earlier. John felt helpless, knowing he couldn't do anything except watch. The enemies started preparing food. One of them noticed the axe John had dropped earlier. Realizing there was danger, he alerted the rest, and they began searching the area. Seeing this, John quickly covered the woman's body with leaves and lay low to hide. When the enemies left, he crawled back to the house and saw a wounded enemy guarding it. John waited for the guard to leave. As soon as the guard went inside, John approached the boy tied to the ground. John tried to save the boy, but the boy, seeing John, started screaming. He thought John would harm him. John calmed him down and began untying the ropes, but the boy wouldn't stop crying. Hearing the noise, the enemies prepared to come outside. By then, John had untied the boy and helped him escape. After the boy left, John entered the house, where he saw a wooden box with a lock on it. He was sure the medicines were inside the box. He tried breaking the lock, putting all his strength into it, but couldn't open it. Just then, John noticed the enemy leader had returned. Quickly, John hid under the house and waited for the leader to leave. When the leader entered the house, he noticed the dirt on the lock, realizing someone had tried to open it. He informed the other enemies, and they decided to search the area. John, understanding they had discovered him, stayed hidden. The enemies found the woman's body and grew even more suspicious. John waited there all day, until night fell. At night, he saw the enemies burning the woman's body. Meanwhile, John's wife regained consciousness at their home. Not finding John, she decided to leave the house but couldn't open the door as it was locked from the inside. She tried breaking the door, but couldn't because of her injuries. She grew weaker and fell to the ground. John waited all night, and when the enemies were asleep, he quietly sneaked into the camp. He carefully went to the leader and stole the key hanging around his neck. Using the key, he opened the box. His suspicion was correct. The medicines were inside the box. He quickly took the medicines, locked the box again, and left. But in his haste, he forgot about the bell wires. As soon as he hit the wire, the bell rang, waking up the leader and the rest of the enemies. They started chasing John. John tried to run but, due to weakness, couldn't go far. The enemies caught him, took away his warm clothes, and tied him to the ground. They started lighting a fire, as if preparing to cook him. John noticed the whistle nearby, picked it up, and blew it loudly. The loud sound attracted wild dogs. Hearing the barking, the leader and the enemies fled. Taking advantage of the situation, John used the knife to cut his ropes, hid behind a tree, and barely escaped. The dogs didn't notice him, and he survived. John quickly wore his clothes and ran away. But the leader, being cunning, injured one of his companions, letting the dogs attack him instead. The leader then continued pursuing John alone. John, unaware of this, sat exhausted by a tree. The leader suddenly attacked him from behind, kicking him hard. The leader was determined to kill John and wouldn't let him go alive. But John, showing bravery, fought back. They had an intense fight, and John eventually killed the leader brutally. After some time, another enemy arrived. He saw someone dragging John, thinking it was his companion. But John had tricked him by making the enemy wear his clothes. Before the enemy could realize it, John attacked and killed him too. John then moved forward, determined to finish the leader as well. The leader, standing at a distance, wasn't afraid. John aimed his spear and hit the leader's leg, causing him to fall. John rushed toward him to attack again, but his aim faltered, putting them on equal footing again. Both picked up knives and stood face to face for a final fight. Before the fight began, they heard the barking of wild dogs. John ran away. The leader tried to flee too, but due to his injured leg, he couldn't go far. The wild dogs attacked him, tearing him apart and eating him. Thus, John's revenge was complete. He had eliminated all the enemies and retrieved the medicines for his wife. He quickly returned home. After facing so many difficulties, he found the door open and his wife missing. John grew hopeless, thinking his wife might have fallen victim to wild dogs or wolves. He sat on the ground, crying. But then his wife appeared from behind and came to him. That day, she had prayed for her life and tried to save herself, which is why she survived. Both reunited, relieved and happy to see each other alive. And with this, the story of the movie ends.